Can I ask you to identify yourself and which 1, 2, 3, 4, 5?
I'm Christy, and I'm number 4 in the family of 5 girls.
5 girls, okay.
Or as my dad would like to put it, he and my mom have 3 girls
All right.
and 2 ladies.
So
I don't know which one I am,
you-
whether I'm just one of the girls or one of the ladies.
So you haven't quite figured that
No,
out
I
yet?
haven't, especially after having 3 kids.
Okay. Christy, the project is the FVR Oral History project. We call it that way. Just because we need to have a title for it.
Okay, that's nice.
We've identified initially 100 people to do these interviews. And of course, diba, we need to get someone to tell us about what life was in the FVR household. We made an initial sally last Friday, and the apos, one of them was your kid.
He's not quite a kid anymore, but
Yeah,
he'll always
yeah.
be my kid.
Yes, of course. So, he and CJ.
Yeah, my nephew.
Yeah, we're
2
here
last son.
Yeah, right. Okay, so the way I started with that is I'd like to start it with this one too. What was life like in the Ramos household?
That's an interesting question because it's also kind of difficult because you don't have anything to compare it with.
All right.
So, meaning, that's the only household you have grown up in since you were a kid and since after you've left home. So that to me was the normal for us. That was the normal. But after a while, when you grow up and you kind of compare it with your friends, like what do you do at home or how do you spend time with your family? You kind of have this inkling now that you're actually different. And I'm saying different because number one, of course, my father was a career professional military man. And after that, of course, he became the president of this country. And and of course, my mother was a professional working woman as well. She was working full time. And we're 5 girls. We were 5 girls. So you're growing up in a household where, a lot of high standards are trying to be, are being imposed on 5 girls. And from a military man. So it's kind of a difficult thing, I think, to reconcile in the beginning because girls are supposed to be frivolous and they want to do their own thing. And I think this strong-willed independence characteristic that we girls actually adopted came from my mother as well. Because as far as I know, ever since I was born, she had always been a working woman. So growing up at the time, and I was born in 1959, so I grew up, 1960s, 1970s, where the women's movement was just, coming into fore.
Flower child.
Yeah, the flower children, and of course, everyone wants to do their own thing, the independence and trying to express their own individuality. So I grew up in that generation, and I think given that, those influences made us quite independent women, which I have to thank my mother for, because of course my dad was a full-time military professional. He was out a lot, and my mother would be, both mother and father, and still working at the same time, full-time. So I think that had a very big impact on me as an individual because it also gave me a sense of, my gender being female shouldn't be, a hindrance to what I want to be in
No
life.
typecasts?
Yeah, kind of typecast because, of course, women, you girls are supposed to be dainty and well-behaved, and you're supposed to be polite and kind, and you're not supposed to do, rash things and act like a boy. And I think, to me, that kind of hit home a bit hard because I was a self-professed tomboy. I loved being active.
Right.
I loved doing sports. I loved to play.
Right. Very, very
Yeah.
physical activities
I
early
just
on.
like
No?
doing the physical stuff. And of
Yeah,
course,
yeah.
I think on my dad's side, that was ideal because being physically fit and physical activity was something so crucial to being a successful soldier. But of course, on the side of, being on the feminine side, that kind of contradicted, how I should have behaved and all that.
Or the typical mold.
Yeah, exactly, as a female. But the other thing I think, which also kind of, countered that image also was the fact that my mother was a physical education major. So she got her master's degree from, UCLA. And she was still very active as an athlete then. So
Right.
she would play, badminton and play golf. And, we kids would actually go with our parents on the weekends when they were free, and they would say,
And you'd
"Okay,
get
kids,
into these
let's
activities."
go swimming or let's play badminton."
right.
So for us kids, that was kind of normal. But later I found out it was like, especially when my dad was president, because I was getting into the sports field, and I had just gotten my master's degree in sport and athletic administration from the States. So they would ask, like, why is Christy in sports? Because she's the daughter of President Ramos. So that to me was a little strange because I thought, hey, I had earned this on my own merits.
Your entire,
Yeah, because
your
I
entire
was,
life.
I grew up in that environment where sport and physical activity was just normal. So I had to explain to others, it's like growing up in an environment, let's say a musical family, where they would probably spend their time together playing, music or learning, different musical instruments and all that. So I said, it's just like us. We would spend family time and bond together through sport. And then it's sort of like, that's where it kicks in with them, that they do understand. Or I would say it's like going to the movies or going to a shopping mall together as a family.
Yeah.
So for us, it was just sort of our bonding time was sport.
Yeah.
And I just sort of grew up in that natural environment.
All right. Career professional military man. Did FVR have that typical, military disciplinarian, hand with
I
the,
think,
with the girls?
there was sort of something natural to him. Of course, it's a part, or it was part of his, natural demeanor to have that discipline that you have to wake up at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, you've already eaten breakfast, 8 o'clock you do your chores and all that. And we had like a summer vacation where, of course, because we went to school in UP Elementary School.
Right.
And this was in Diliman. And we lived in Makati at that time. So every single day you would wake up at about 5:30 in the morning just to catch the bus, the military school bus, which shuttled us from, Makati to...
From home to school.
Yeah, from home to school.
And back.
Exactly. So, this routine was pretty hard on us. I think you have to wake up so early every day. So, of course, summer vacation, you're on your own time. You don't really have much to do. So you just want to sleep, right? But my dad would come out with this, like blackboard, and list out, okay, 5 o'clock, you wake up, and then you have to do these
In the
chores and
middle
all
of
that
summer.
stuff. During the
still have to
summer
do-
on vacations. So it's like, okay, first day, okay, we can do this. And then second day, third day, it just kind of, dwindles and like, wake up. No, we're not going to wake up. So I think after 1 week, my dad just kind of gives up. Like, okay, just leave them alone, let them enjoy their vacation. So I think, he also realizes that we're girls, like you have to be a little more easy on the girls, I
We're
guess,
girls
at that
or we're
point.
kids.
Yeah, we're kids, you have to be a little easy on the kids.
Yeah.
But of course, I think in some way or in a lot of ways, we developed that discipline.
Right. Right.
That, if we had to do something or we needed to do something, then yeah, you had to have a fixed schedule,
Right.
and you have to plan your day
Right.
to get the most out of it and all
Right.
that.
Right. Right. Yeah, yeah. Was he doting? Did he have any favorites? or
That's
or was that
a
also
good
planned?
question. Yeah, well, I think you can answer him. I mean, you can get that answer from him. But people would like to say that, you're the favorite. And then I go, why? Because you're the boy in the family. Okay, so okay, I get it. Because I was the one in sports. So I would be the one, my dad would say, okay, it's 4 in the morning, wake up, we're going to go jogging, like from Krame to Tanay. Okay, and I'm going with him, right? Or, hey, it's Saturday, let's go scuba diving. And we're diving off Ternate. And the weather is horrendous. It's raining and the current is so strong.
Yeah.
So in those kinds of endeavors, I think I did join my dad. Other times,
you slipped-
reluctantly,
You slipped
other
into the
times,
favorite mold.
maybe only in that sense.
Okay.
Okay. But I would like to think that they were very good times with my dad, like time well spent. In the sense that, of course, because it was a sporting activity
Yeah.
or a physical activity, which I enjoyed very much. But also, I think my dad never failed to educate us in that sense. So, for example, okay, we'd be scuba diving in Batangas, and he would explain, the history or the nature of the place. Or like what he intends to do with at that time, what he intended to do with it. So he would say maybe even ahead of his time, because now you have everything like environmentally friendly, everything or environmental concerns. And my dad at that time had said, and this was in the 1970s, he said, we have to preserve the underwater environment. And in fact, he did plant a marble cross down in Anilao, Batangas.
Wow. Okay.
And I haven't been there in a while, but the last time I was there was about 10 years ago. So the coral really have flourished there. A lot of color, and a lot of fish.
Yep.
So, and the cross is still there,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
would think.
yeah.
So you do get this sense now that, my dad really had a lot of foresight.
His vision.
He could see it, and not only that, I think he also respected the environment. Maybe as God's creation, I think it was more that. So he always encouraged this, like, conserve energy, conserve the environment, even before they were bywords, before they were
Yeah.
the in thing.
But being a professional military man, and in your case, for example, you were very much into athletics, physical education. I mean, there were a lot of similarities along those lines, right? The discipline of an athlete, the discipline of a soldier.
Yeah, exactly. And this is partly the funny thing, because I think if I had been born or maybe lived maybe a few years later, I actually probably would have followed his footsteps as a military person.
Wow.
Because in 1976, that was the first time West Point admitted
Accepted
women
women, yes.
into their program. And in 1977, I graduated from high school. I graduated from the States. So during graduation, my folks went and we visited West Point at that time. This was in 1977. And my aunt was actually joking the superintendent's wife. And my aunt said, "Oh, my niece is here, she wants to enter West Point." And, the wife goes along with this and hands me the brochures. And then my aunt goes, "Oh, actually, I'm only joking." But it just got me thinking that I said, I think I would have wanted to go into that, but I thought my future, if I had gone back to the Philippines after I graduated from West Point, had it happened, I wouldn't have really exactly followed his career path in the sense that I think at that time, this was in the 1970s, when there were no women generals
Right.
in the service.
Right. Right.
So I think the highest was only a colonel, and they were just serving, in the WACs,
Yeah, yeah.
the Women's Auxiliary Corps,
Auxiliary services.
or the medical corps,
Right.
the nurses, the nursing corps. And I said, I don't really want to do that. I'd like to be in the field. I'd like to be a general. I'd like to follow in the footsteps of my dad if I had been in the military. So that kind of, okay, never mind, because I didn't see a lot of future for me
Right.
at that time.
It wasn't. The institution wasn't quite prepared for women
And
yet.
I think
no?
it wasn't so much at West Point because they had started to open their
Yeah.
doors to women,
I mean,
but
the
it was more
Philippines.
in the Philippines,
Right,
exactly.
right, yeah.
But it's good now that you do,
Yeah.
you have
With
women.
field commanders. Right?
Yeah, and they're women and they're generals, and
Yeah, we have
they're
star.
doing they're doing a tremendous job.
Mm-hmm.
So I just followed my path in sports, and of course no regrets because again, that influence and I think that God-given talent that I had or have in in the physical side and probably also in the mental side was really influenced by my parents.
FVR, the dad. Did he get mad? How did
Always.
he? How did he manifest this?
No, I think you're trying to balance out a lot of things. Meaning, his role as a dad, him being, one of the top officials in the military,
Right.
and of course in the Philippines. Also trying to find the time, the quality time, and trying to balance out that affectionate, loving side of him, but he also has that strict disciplinarian side of him
Yeah.
as a military person. But I think as a dad, he really made a big effort to, be a good parent to us. And again, I think he did a tremendous job in the sense that he would advise us
Okay.
and try to spend quality time with us. But that he's also got to go to work
Oh,
after a
yeah.
while. Like, for example, we'd have lunch and dinner with him.
Right, all over the
And say,
place.
yeah, exactly. It's like, okay, bye, because I have to attend to this, to this situation. So it was kind of disappointing in a way because, of course, we would have wanted to spend more time with my dad. But I think he also made sure that it was quality time. So also that, trying to blend in the work factor there.
Right.
So I think he did a good job with that.
Okay. Was he soft inside? Was he a softy inside?
At times he was. Especially, I think on special occasions, especially with my mom there. So, for example, if it was my mom's birthday or their wedding anniversary,
Right.
then you really see his soft side. Or even sometimes, of course, when you graduate or it's your birthday, so, my dad would say, hey, you get flowers naman for your mom. Things like that. And he would really try to make it special. Okay, sometimes we would think, this is so corny, like it's too cheesy or it's too sentimental.
But he still went through with it.
Yes, exactly. But I think, that's how he really shows the emotional or the soft side of him.
Okay. And what was it like growing up as his daughter? I mean, when did you finally realize that, hey, it's not an ordinary family? Mom is not an ordinary mom, dad is no ordinary dad, and we're no ordinary kids. When did that, what age did that dawn on you?
Gradually, it was kind of building up, even, during elementary school days. So, for example, okay, I would have honors in elementary school.
Right.
And they would have this ceremony where the parents are supposed to come and attend. And I would be the one with no parent. So it would always be like, either my grandmother coming in
All
to
right.
represent the family,
Or-
or
or-
I would just have nobody there, to receive the award. So it was sort of that, while my other friends and other classmates would have their parents with them. So it's, it was at that time that, hey, there's something wrong here, but I can't exactly pin down
Yeah.
what it is, okay? So it's also the point that, hey, I'm achieving, meaning, I'm in the honor roll. I'm number 3 in the whole class of 150, students and all that. Or, I'm winning a trophy, but my parents aren't there. So it's sort of that realization that, yeah, okay, I'm different, or there's something wrong. And I think through the course of the whole thing, you also, you also get this message that, nothing spectacular in what you're doing. That's just expected. Like, that's what you're supposed to do
Right.
as a Ramos. You're supposed to excel. You're supposed to achieve the honors. And if you achieve, really higher honors, for example, you graduate summa cum laude or something, that's okay, maybe that's exceptional. Or if you get a PhD, that's okay, maybe that's exceptional. But if you just graduate, with honors, or you won this trophy, or, you won an award, like, that's normal. That's supposed to be normal in the family.
So that normal was actually
Yeah, for
a bit-
everyone else.
right,
Yeah,
right,
I mean,
right.
you kind of realize this over the course of your life. And of course, also, I think more so when, when I was in high school. Because now, the boys and my friends want to visit me at home
There you
or
are.
call me.
I'm gonna be getting there, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and it's, this is like martial law time, okay?
Right,
This
right,
is like 1972 upwards. And these are my teen years, so, okay, of course the boy comes and, can we visit you? And then I go, well, I have to ask my parents, if I can go out, or like if you can visit me at home. But of course, there's also that curfew.
Right, right.
And, of course, they find out that, oh, she's the daughter of General Ramos.
Yeah,
You
right.
know?
Did they get to ask you if they could visit before they found out about who your dad was? And did they get to ask you if they could visit after learning who he
right,
was?
the before and after scenes, right? So, no, I think they already knew. But I
Oh,
guess,
good background check, huh?
yeah, but they also have this, kind of this bravery, this courage.
Yeah,
that
yeah.
I want to get to know Christy more, and I will take the risk.
Okay.
That type of thing. And of course, I guess it's also on the guy's part, where they're growing up as boys to men, and they're testing their limits. So I think it also comes from there that. Okay, I don't care where your dad is, but I want to visit you and I want to know who you are. So, yeah, okay. The next question they ask is, will there be a tank in front of your house? Or will there be machine guns in front of your house? I go, no, I mean, the security might be there, but we're not going to have a tank in front of our house. But then, after a while, they're kind of like reluctant, like, never mind na lang. We're not going to visit you. Okay, so it's kind of, heartbreaking and disappointing. Because then you also kind of think that, was he just making an excuse, or is it really because I'm fat and ugly? And because, of course, this is the teenage years where you're still trying to figure out who you are.
And were you appreciative at least that some guy?
Yeah, but I think that, that kind of mentality and that kind of attitude still actually spreads over until now. So when people find out, like, oh, you're the daughter of, I go, yeah, I think so. We have the same surname. And, they're kind of, taken aback, or they're kind of reluctant to really engage and, just have normal conversation with you.
Suddenly, the texture changes. And
Yeah, exactly. And like, to me, so it sort of, the responsibility is shifted over to me, in the sense that I have to make them comfortable. I have to engage in, like, small baduy talk. Just to get them, engaged in trying to, just human relationships, or just having a normal conversation.
Relax.
And I think, the scariest statement that I have always had to hear is, "Oh, you're Christy Ramos, you're the daughter of? I've heard so much about you." Or like, "Uh-oh," it's like, okay, what do they know about me? Or what have they heard about me?
Yeah, right.
So that's scary to me. For me personally,
Kikay days, girls' night
I
out.
really, maybe fortunately or unfortunately, I really didn't have a barakata.
No.
I mean, I think it's also my character. It's my personal choice, in the sense that, because in those teen years, not that I was being a snob, or not that I was being mayabang or standoffish, but it was more because I was so engaged in sport. I was just training every day for, like, after school.
What were you into?
I was in volleyball first.
Right.
So I played for the Philippine Women's University High
Right.
School for 3 years. And the way the schedule went was, okay, after school, you train, and
Right.
we were dismissed like about 3 or 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
We would train for 3 hours
Right.
after that. And
Right.
this is every day. And then we have matches Saturday and Sunday.
Right.
So I just didn't have time for, the barakada thing. But it's not as if I was a hermit and isolated myself from, friends. Because I think my friends did understand this part of me, this side of me, which was so essential to me.
Yeah.
And because I enjoyed it tremendously, and I felt,
No goofing around with the teammates.
yeah, I mean, there were times, of course. Yeah, it's not as if it was so strict that, there wasn't any real time for goofing around. I mean, there was. And I think, going back to my parents, I have to thank them, because they also had this sense, which I got from them, that, work hard, play hard.
Oh, okay.
So, they, like my parents, they would work so hard, of course, when they had to work hard. But when it was time to, their downtime, they'd have fun.
Yep. Yeah.
And they would have this tremendous sense of humor, which I think we all got. Up to the point that, my dad would tell jokes every so often. It's like, that's so corny. We've heard it like 1 million times.
Okay.
But I think that's our sense of fun, our sense of family fun.
What was
So
that
I
like?
wasn't so remiss, or I don't think I missed so much, the barkada scene. Although sometimes I look at it like, oh, what was that dance before? Swing, I think.
Yeah.
And you had to practice,
Right,
right? And
right,
I just
right.
didn't have time for this. So, in the rare times that I would attend parties with my friends or classmates, and they would do the swing, with the boys, and I'm just sitting down watching them, because I hadn't had time to practice this with a partner. So, I mean, in that sense, I guess, sometimes, I miss that and all that. But there were other areas which, occupied my time, and I felt fulfilled, and this was sport. So in the sense that, barkada thing, it's sort of like, I'll do it with you when I have time.
Let me just get back to that quick one. Downtime with Mrs. Ramos and FVR, so ribbing jokes and all that happened. What was it like? I mean, did
When you
everybody
first-
have a special joke for everyone else? Or
No, it was kind of a spontaneous
Yeah.
thing, so like it's kind of when you observe something, then, you make a joke out of it and all that.
or some
Yeah.
faux pas, for example, that happened that
Yeah, exactly.
you never hear the end
and
of
I think,
it.
it's kind of, I think what I also learned from the family, from my parents, is that you can learn to laugh at yourself.
Yeah.
You don't have to take yourself seriously all the
Yeah,
time,
right,
Of course, like, because I think that also stems from the fact that my parents are in such a serious environment, of
Right.
course, and they have to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, I think we were dragged into that same environment because, you're the first family. And you got to be serious with the stuff that you do, especially when you're in public. None of this, it's a joke stuff. Because people look at you, and of course, the respect and, the impression is there that whatever you say is policy or whatever you say is serious stuff. So it's never like we're going to say this and then after a while we apologize. Oh, it's only a joke. It was never like that.
There you
But
go.
after that, behind closed doors, then, you learn how to laugh at yourself and say, oh, I made that mistake. Ha, ha, ha.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Any guidelines, do's and don'ts? That, you were getting into that.
I
So
think,
did your parents?
when we were
you know-
growing up, and I also have to thank my grandparents for that. So it was Secretary Narciso Ramos and my Lola, Mrs. Angela Valdez Ramos. And they were diplomats. And of course, my Lola Ilang was the complete diplomat's wife. So everything would be proper, proper protocol, everything, in the right place at the right time and all this. And they were very religious people, so they would take us to Cosmopolitan Church because
Right.
we're Protestants. They would take us to church every Sunday. And I think combining that with the Protestant work ethic, we grew up in that. So it was sort of like, there was really very little guidelines, if you're talking about, set guidelines. Because it was sort of already understood that we have to behave, we have to be proper, we have to be polite, we have to be nice, but not in an artificial way though. It was sort of already ingrained in something sincere that
As
we
you were
just we
growing
do.
up,
Yeah.
ano? Yeah,
We,
part
we
of the
just grew up in
development.
that environment. So when my dad became president, we already knew, for example, that taking bribes and being corrupt and asking for favors was, something you don't do.
Cussing in public.
Cussing in public, disrespectful, saying God is stupid. I mean, you just don't do that stuff. So it's not as if that, my parents had to explicitly say that, don't curse or don't say the PI word. It's just never done in the family because we did grow up in that environment where, we were disciplined and you were taught proper manners and you were taught how to behave and respect people.
Let me get to the very first one that I asked, Kikai days.
Kikay days, I really like that
Yeah,
because
remember curfew? Were you allowed to stay?
I really like that because I never thought of myself as a girly girl.
Okay.
Which is really funny because I always just thought I was a tomboy, but not, in the gender sense. So I wasn't gay. I just liked doing physical stuff. I
yeah.
just liked doing physical activity.
Yeah,
I just enjoyed it. But it was funny because when I started women's football, women's soccer, in the late 1970s, and this was very new in the Philippines because I
Right.
had played volleyball for a long time, like, maybe more than 10 years. And I started to play, discovered women's football when I was already a sophomore in college, when I was in UP Los Baños. I was taking up agribusiness. And for me, it was just like, okay, women's soccer, it was just another sport for me to try. And I had just enjoyed it tremendously, and it sort of just took off from there. And I said, I've had enough of volleyball, enough with the hands, and now we'll go with the feet. So that's how it was. But, I still like being kikai, if you want to call it that. Kikai in the sense that, I enjoyed, putting on makeup and looking nice, not necessarily wearing a dress because, I was more comfortable in pants. But, looking nice to, the opposite sex.
Right.
And going on dates and being treated like a lady, that to me was very nice. I like that. And To me, there was no disparity with my being athletic. Although I think for some men or for some people, they find it too brusco, or like she's too aggressive, or she doesn't care, like she's making bukaka, she's not sitting right, or what. Okay, so. To me, it was sort of like, take it or leave it. I mean,
Yeah,
that's how
yeah,
I am.
yeah.
I'm trying to behave, but I can't. I'm like, I can't be any more kikai, or I can't be any more feminine than you want me to be. So I just had to, have this persona of being trying to be feminine, but still maintaining the athletic side as well. And I think through the years, people just saw that like, oh, she's not gay after all. Because when I started playing football, people would say, why are you playing football? Are you gay?
Because it's totally out
Yeah.
of the mold,
So, and I said, one doesn't have anything to do
to
with
do with the
each
other.
other.
Right.
And I just thought, God gave me this gift of being athletically talented.
Right.
And this is what I like to do. I'm interested in this, and I'm comfortable with this.
Yeah, why not do it?
Yeah,
Huh?
and so I don't see any reason why I cannot wear red lipstick and play football at the same time.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
FBR's daughter, Boone or Bane? Did it give you a
Both.
leg up or weighed you down? Okay.
both. I think it's both, but again, it's it's my gift. It's what God gave me, or it's what God gave to my parents. I was born into that family, and it was something that I just had and still do make the most out of it. So we start with a boon. Because of course I would like to think that I was born into a family of privilege, with very talented, intelligent parents,
Right.
with good values, with good hearts. So, and of course, a comfortable life, not lavish, not extreme, but a comfortable life.
yeah.
Because both of them were very hardworking, and they really tried to do what they could to raise us as good people. And of course, over the years, because of their hard work, my parents were able to build this positive reputation, which people respect and they admire. And I think by just being the daughter of these wonderful parents, you're dragged into sort of the same mold, into the same image that, oh, she's the daughter of President and Mrs. Ramos. She must be a good person, or she must be a nice person, which is really nice. And of course, there is sometimes a hesitation to engage, because again, the reputation precedes you.
Yeah.
So that's kind of hard. But eventually they find that, oh yeah, she's not so stupid after all, or she makes sense. And if they see the name Ramos or the daughter of, that opens up a lot of doors to to other opportunities, whether maybe we deserved it or not. But I think it was also like, my parents would emphasize all the time, you have to work hard for whatever you want in life. So it's not just the family name, the Ramos name, that's going to carry you over.
But that's double-edged, right?
It is very double-edged. I think maybe specifically for me.
Yeah.
I don't know about my sisters, but I think it was for me specifically very double-edged, because I was in a very public arena after after we became first family, because I went into sports and I knew this was exactly what I wanted to do. Like again, I graduated with a master's degree in sport and athletic administration. I founded women's football. I was the captain of the national women's football team from 1980 to 1986. And I really, got my boots dirty. I, rolled in the mud, all the aches and pains of being an athlete. I just went through all that, the ropes. It's not because I was there because I'm the daughter of. So I did earn my stripes, so to speak. And I was maybe, okay, aggressive with it in the sense that I could see what was wrong with Philippine sports, and I wasn't hesitating to use, the position, the power that I had to instill the reforms and the changes and introduce, new innovations which were needed at that time. But a lot of people, I think more so, the sports media saw me as too aggressive, or, she's being a spoiled brat daughter of, and all that stuff. And they couldn't get beyond that thinking and just trying to think of really what my own merits was. So I was just being constantly attacked, like almost every day. And it was so funny that when I was being ousted as the president of the Philippine Olympic Committee in 1999, I was loading gas in my car, and the gas boy would say, "Oh, ma'am, ikaw pala si CRISTY Ramos," because they recognized me by my face, because I was plastered on the papers almost every day.
Yep.
And they would say, "Kamusta na yung kaso nyo?" And I would say, "Okay naman, I'm trying, maraming salamat," and all that. And it just occurred to me at that time, like, oh, I'm being in the public at that time so much that people are following my story like a soap opera, that they already know the details of this case. So in that sense, it was a bane. And of course, the fact that people are always observing you for whatever purpose, whether they're looking at your makeup or your lipstick or your hairstyle, your kikay look, or, your shoes are baduy, or, your skirt's too short, or you're too fat, you're too ugly, whatever. Those are the things that kind of make it a bane. Because you're never yourself.
Right.
It's difficult. And we were brought up and raised in a relatively very private environment. We weren't public people until my dad became president of the country.
But yeah, you were being evaluated, assessed by certain parameters, prejudged.
Exactly,
prejudged,
yeah.
right?
And that, that's in a way the bane of it, because, people don't want to be more open-minded, and it's always, relating your worth as because she's the daughter of the president. So it's sort of, that's your only qualification in life. They don't look beyond she's done this, this.
Right, and you did mention that.
Yes.
Why is she into that? But they didn't quite look at the training,
the other
the
factors,
academic.
yes. And the hardships that I actually really had to go through.
So I suppose there was some pressure as well, to do well in school, act a certain way in public, maintain a level of decorum. So was there pressure? What did you feel that, or was it again?
Yeah, I think especially when we were kids, I felt a lot of pressure in the sense that, of course, it was sort of, an unspoken edict or an unspoken requirement, criteria in the family, that you had to do well in school. That's sort of already like a given. It's sort of like a given that, you have to eat good food to be healthy, right?
Right.
So that was sort of unwritten. And in a way, I'm glad my parents, injected that into us when we were young. Because now I have 3 children, and I try to inject the same values and the same standards to my kids. And they have actually done exceptionally well. So, and it was only not just academics, but also, in everything that you do.
Right,
So, for example, for me, for sports, I'm not just going to be a mediocre athlete, or I'm not just going to go through the ropes of kicking or jumping or throwing. But you had to do it exceptionally well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Did FVR intervene or push you towards one direction and one sister towards this? And was there some influence exerted, on your decisions, career,
I think,
studies,
yeah, in terms of career and studies, I think
schools?
aside from, of course, that you have to be exceptional, or you have to achieve the highest standards that you can in whatever you do or whatever you enter into. But in choosing, the field or the area that we had to get into, it wasn't as if like, okay, like Angel, you go into politics, or Joe, you go into music, or Chula, you go into finance, or Christy, you go into sports, or Margie, you go into, human resources. It wasn't exactly that, but I think it was also on the wise decision of my parents to also expose us to different things. So meaning all of us, all the five sisters, we were all exposed to sporting activities. So, whether it was badminton, swimming, like all of us can swim, all of us can play badminton, those things. And my parents just let it grow naturally. And I think it was with me personally, individually, that I was the one who really went into sport. Although, my other sisters are actually quite, athletic.
Athletic, yeah.
In fact, my late sister Jo was in the national water skiing team,
Right,
and she won a gold medal at that time in the Southeast Asian Games. So we just and she was musically and artistically talented as well. So we just all kind of had our own different, specialties. And my parents just allowed us to kind of, explore and expand and grow into those areas. So for me, again, sport was my thing. It was natural for me. And I think the fact that my dad, also had to do all these physical activities.
Right.
I was sort of the natural choice that, yeah, Christy, let's go run at 4 in the morning, So that was just kind of a natural thing. So it wasn't really, pigeonholing the daughters that you had to be this or you had to be that. But it was more, what we were interested in, what our talents were.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Do
just
it.
go ahead, but do it well.
The only rule being be exceptional.
Yes,
Excel.
exactly. Yes. So that is really, in a way, the bane, because it is really a difficult act to follow, especially given, what my parents and, of course, my grandparents have already
Have done,
achieved.
have started.
Yes.
It's quite a legacy to live,
Yes, exactly. So that's the bane, in the sense that, of course, you want to be exceptional and you want to be excellent in the field that you're in. But it's also a very high bar to match.
Tell me about FVR, the granddad, with the
Oh,
apos.
I think he's.
Is he a lot leaner now than?
I think so. He's such a doting granddad. He loves his grandchildren, and he loves spending time with the grandkids now. I think more so than with the daughters, but maybe also because the period, the time that we grew up in, and of course now my dad, after the presidential years and after the military years, he has more time now. He's more relaxed. He's not worrying so much about the country now. And, the grandchildren are a little more grown up, and they want to engage with their lolo and their lola. So I think my dad really enjoys that, the interaction with the kids. And in fact, a lot of the grandchildren are out of the country. And I think he's just really thankful, with the internet and, Viber and all these messenger services and apps, because then, they can talk to, their lolo on weekends, and not like when we were growing up.
So is he leaner now? Is he less strict, do you think?
I think so, he is, but still.
How does he discipline them?
Give them back to the mothers for the discipline. Return to owner, right? Return to sender. I think for my dad and my mom as grandparents, as lolo and lola, they still want to impart to the, to the grandkids, to the apos, similar values of what they taught us, children, their daughters. But of course now with kind of a richer sense because they've gone through more experiences than when we were growing up.
Yep.
Okay, meaning, when I was growing up, of course, my dad wasn't the president yet.
Yeah.
And I couldn't appreciate yet, maybe in a broader sense, what my parents were trying to do. But the grandchildren can see that, because now Lolo has done this and, has tried to achieve so much for the country. And he has that wealth of experience, that wealth of stories to impart to the grandchildren now. That, you have to take care of the environment, of course. You have to be patriotic.
Yep.
You have to be concerned about your country, what happens to it. And in fact, he keeps on saying that you have to leave the situation or the country or the area that you've been in better than when you found it.
Yeah. Yep.
So that is the lesson that he is also trying to impart for the kids. And of course, his motto in the RP Dev Foundation, which is caring, sharing, and daring. So my dad, as Lolo, always emphasizes that. Aside from, distributing T-shirts all the time that says Team Philippines.
Right. Yeah.
Okay? So these, bywords and lessons are what my grandparents, especially Lolo Eddie, tries to impart to the apos. And my kids, sometimes they come back to me and say, Mom, I'm just realizing now how rich my heritage is. And they're really doing it on their own. Like, they're researching on their ancestors.
Yep.
What was it like? Who is my relative here? Who was Lola Ilang? Who was Lola Se? The mother of my mom,
Yeah.
who founded the Philippine School of Social Work.
Yes.
So I think in that sense, my children, and of course my nieces and nephews, are so fortunate in the sense that, they have such positive role models in the persona of the grandparents and great grandparents and, those before them. That, again, what I see as we were growing up, again, writing the guidelines, how to behave and all that, they really didn't need that, like a specific list, an explicit list of how you should behave,
Do's and
number 1, 2,
don'ts,
3,
right.
4, 5 down the line.
No.
Because they've grown up in that environment with, I would like to think, of course, the parents, the mothers, taught them good values, and of course, being reinforced by what the grandparents, Lolo Eddie and Lola Ming, have taught them. So it's, again, this environment, this positive environment of good values, they are carrying in them and hopefully to the next generation.
Any favorites among the grandkids?
Whoever's there. No, because I think now, of course, the generation of the now,
The
the
apos.
millennials,
Yep.
they're so mobile, they're almost all over the place. So it's almost hard to get everyone together. And it's almost like, whoever's there, okay, Lolo and Lola spent a lot of time with them. But of course, trying to still treat them as individuals. And not only because, okay, you're here, I'll pay attention to you. No, my dad always tries to get everyone together as much as possible because it's always a happy time, I think. The grandchildren enjoy their time with the grandparents, with Lola and Lola. It's always a happy time.
I realize
especially
that.
like Christmas.
Yeah.
And the fact that some of the grandchildren now live abroad, and of course it's hard to get together with them physically. So it's always a special time when we're all together because again it's the downtime.
Yep.
It's time to relax. It's we're away from the public and the scrutinizing eyes and trying to judge us for whatever their standards are. Like we can just be baduy. If we want to be baduy, we want to be corny. Okay, that's fine. And nobody judges us on those, on those criteria. We're just being ourselves.
When you're all
Yes,
together.
and it's a fun time.
Okay. Christy, let me get to a few crucial historical points. And I'd like to get your what was going on in your head, in your heart when these things were when these days were happening. Martial law.
Martial law, I was a freshman in high school, and I went to the Philippine Women's University High School for 3 years. And the time they declared martial law, it was an all-girls school. So, and of course, like, people already knew who I was, who my father was. And of course, like, having to be so closely affiliated with the Marcos administration. And of course, martial law, because my dad was a general.
The PC was the chief implementer.
Yes, supposedly. Okay,
right.
I mean, well, one of the okay,
yeah.
because of course, aside from the AFP,
Yeah,
right? So I would be judged also in that sense that, oh, your dad is, General Ramos, and they're arresting people left and right. And in fact, I graduated from 6th grade in 1972 from UP Elementary School.
Yes.
And in 1972, let me backtrack a little bit, that was the height of student activism.
Right.
And of course, we were living in Makati at that time, and I had passed the Philippine Science High School exam. But even the students from Philippine Science High School were getting involved in, all this student activism.
Politicized.
Yes, and getting politicized. So, it would have been nice to join my friends, because I had attended UP Elementary School from nursery to
Right.
6th grade,
Right.
and a lot of them were going on to Philippine Science High School or UP High. And so that separation from them was a bit difficult for me, because I had grown up with these kids. I had developed good friendships with them. But because, again, 1972, this was the height of student activism. And my dad at that time was still in the Army. He was the head of J2, which was intelligence. So it was a very precarious and
Wow.
dangerous position, actually, for me to have continued in UP, if ever, or even Philippine Science High School. So I studied in PWU
Women's.
for in women's for my high school. This was 1973, and I was a freshman. But again, people judging me, not all, but some, your father, is the implementer of martial law, blah, blah, blah. And I couldn't really argue or, put up a strong defense against my dad at that time. I was maybe 14, 15 years old.
Right.
So, we just all had to accept it, of course. I mean, this wasn't just affecting my family, but it was affecting the whole country, of
Everyone,
course.
yeah.
So I just had to be a little more careful, of course, and try to ignore the negative, comments of it, and of course just let it flow, because it was there, and
Right.
I couldn't do anything about it. And martial law, I think my parents in a way were happy because there was curfew. So we were all home before 12 o'clock.
Right,
And not only my parents, but I think with a lot of parents out there, they knew where their children were, and they were safe at home.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but I think this is also a time for me that I had developed a strong bond with other military kids.
Oh, okay.
So, we would bond with people like, the kids of officers from
Right.
Camp Crame and Fort Bonifacio
Yes, yes,
and
yes.
Camp Aguinaldo and,
Right,
Nichols Air
right.
Base at that time.
Yes,
Because we were all military brats. We were all in the same boat. Like, our parents were in the military and they were involved somehow, of course, with martial law. So that was also a time for bonding for, other kids who were in the same situation.
yeah. Fast forward a few years later, 10, 15 years later, EDSA 1, 1986. Where were you when
This was a very interesting time for me because,
your dad,
Um,
Minister
I-
Enrile?
yeah.
Yeah.
so I think maybe 2 or 3 weeks before, the EDSA People Power Revolution blew open.
That was the elections and counting,
Yeah,
right?
that was the elections, and my grandfather had just died. I think a
yes.
week before. That was February 11th, I believe, when my grandfather Narciso
away,
Ramos,
yes.
Secretary Narciso Ramos, passed away. So it was also a difficult time for our family. Aside from of course, this I think my dad having this dilemma of whether to stay with the Marcos administration or break away. I think I was about 25 years old at that time. I was already working at the University of Life Sports Office in Pasig. And 2 weeks before that, I had been always listening to Radio Veritas.
Veritas.
Okay, and then for some funny reason, I believe that was a Saturday. I just, I don't want to listen to this anymore because it was always, these political comments and all that. And I just decided to stop listening to it. So that Saturday also, my dad asked us to stay in the house. Okay, you listen to this dialogue because the Corey's Crusaders were going to come to the house and dialogue with my dad and try to convince him to resign from the Marcos administration. And then the phone rang.
This was already in your home?
In Alabang,
Alabang.
yeah, in Alabang. And then the phone rang. And then, my dad said, oh, I have to take this phone call. It was at that time,
Minister
Secretary Enrile. Minister Enrile. And he was just saying like, yes, sir, okay, sir. So you really couldn't get the idea of, what.
Stoic,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Like, like nothing alarming. You couldn't decipher what the message was
Right.
or what they were talking about. And after that conversation, he hung up and he said, "Excuse me, ladies, but I have to go." And little did we know that we wouldn't see him for the next 3 days
Okay.
because that was the time he decided to join Enrile and hold up in Camp Aguinaldo. So I said, okay, finish, dialogue is over. And I had to go over to the University of Life that afternoon because Cardinal Sin was going to hold mass at the football field.
Yeah.
So, we were just going to go over there to check if everything was going to be okay. And I passed through, the Pasig area, through Ortigas and all that, and nothing was going on yet. Okay, no crowds, and this must have been early evening. No crowds, of course, just a sprinkling, a few people, no soldiers, no tanks, no nothing. And I went back home. So, kind of, another day at the office. But when I got home, I sensed that there was something wrong because the security were wearing bandoliers.
Oh, okay.
So it's like, okay, what's going on? And unfortunately, again, at that time, I had switched off Radio Veritas. So I didn't know what was going
happening?
on and what was happening. It was just this strange coincidence. And then we turned on the TV and, there was this announcement. I think it was the Apo Hiking Society. They just said, we have an announcement, pero mamaya nyo na malalaman. And sure enough, they announced this. So I ended up staying in the house at home for 3 days. We couldn't get out. And I think on the second day, we had not slept at all, because we were monitoring the events.
Who decided to, among you guys would just stay at home and Did your dad call your mom and say,
Yeah, well,
let the security take care of her? And
yeah, my
don't
dad actually
leave?
told my mom, like, bye, I won't be home tonight. After that phone call with
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Enrile.
But
And again,
but
little
that's
did we
normal,
know,
right?
yeah, exactly, nothing alarming, right? And little did we know that he wasn't going to be home for the next 3 nights, okay? So I think it was monitoring, both sides, meaning, of course, my dad was checking how we were at home. And of course, my mom, being now the head of the household, was just telling everyone, it's best, it's safest if we
Stay
just
home.
stay home.
Yeah.
But at the same time, our neighbors were actually doing their own mini people power
Right.
in front of the house. And in fact, someone pulled over a pison to block off the road.
So they were like protecting
Yeah,
you guys
protecting
from.
us. Yeah. And it was very nice of them. And in fact, some of them were also bringing food and all that. So it was kind of a tense moment, but also one of friendship and real concern. So we got to know our neighbors, at the same time, but we're just kind of talking to them,
Right,
but
yeah. Over
behind the gate,
yeah, yeah.
right? But we're talking to them outside. So it was also a nice time because our neighbors pulled through and they got together and tried to protect us in their own little way. I mean, compared to what was happening in EDSA, of course.
Right.
And again, I think a lot of prayers and hope that things was going to work out, that no one was going to bomb our house.
Right.
All those hopes and wishes that nothing adverse would happen to us. Aside from, of course, my dad, who was taking the greater risk.
Well, what was going on in your mind? I mean, when you suddenly realized, what's Dad doing? Was that something that?
I think we were kind of, over the years, we were kind of resigned that my dad was always going to choose country before us.
Okay.
I think that had always been his training, his West Point background. Duty, country, honor. Like you kind of have to just put in family somewhere in there, right?
Yeah.
But we knew and we understood that it was for a higher good.
Yes.
It was for something bigger than ourselves. And we just had to accept that, of course. But I think for me personally, there was this, scary feelings, but also like kind of a sense of peace inside. Of course, you have this fear because you don't want anything bad to happen to your father.
Yeah.
But he's also trying to do it for the country, not just for himself. So it was a sacrifice on his part, but, for us, we just had to understand and accept all these things.
What was the worst that could happen? What were you thinking?
The worst
they'd be
for us
overtaken?
was that, they were going to arrest my father or even kill him in the end. But I think for me at that time, it was like a notion or a thought that I didn't want to dwell into.
Okay.
Or even think of, the possibilities of it. I just didn't want to think of that. So it was always just praying and hoping that, Papa was going to be okay.
Yeah.
Because I kind of, in a way, dreaded the worst case scenario.
Right.
Because even I didn't want to think what would exactly happen to my dad had he failed.
That tiny notion that it
Yeah.
might happen, but you didn't.
Yeah, you kind of want to avoid that. And not only that, I think not thinking about that actually helped us become more composed and not be panicky
Right,
and,
right,
cry and, be depressed and all that.
Lose control.
Yeah,
over the
exactly.
situation.
Yeah.
Okay. Few days later,
I
it's
think,
resolved.
Yeah, exactly.
So
But I think in a way, what I actually regretted was not being able to be in that miraculous environment
There
in
you-
EDSA. We couldn't go out in the streets,
Mm.
unfortunately. But yeah, it was after 3 days after we got to mingle with the people. But of course, there's this euphoria, and you do think that you're just this tiny minuscule dot among all these people who probably sacrifice more by just being out on the road in EDSA. And the risk of being shot by a cannon.
Yep. Yeah.
For me, those people, for me at that time, seemed more heroic than I would ever be.
So, yun nga, 4 days later, the situation is settled, resolved. Marcos
Yeah, not quite.
leaves.
They're back in power. Resolved? No.
Not quite. Yeah.
On the long run.
Relief for Dad that he's safe.
Yes, definitely.
But he accepted the post of Chief of Staff.
Yes, exactly. But I think it was again his being a military man, being a good leader, being a good general, because he had to take care of his own military people, the military personnel. And that is one of the reasons why he didn't quit the Marcos administration right away, in spite of, all these calls for him to resign.
Yeah.
In fact, my aunt, the late Senator Leticia Shahani, of course, resigned earlier from the Marcos administration. And, they were saying like, oh, your sister is braver than you are by resigning ahead. But I think it was more of a calculated move. Because my dad would always say, who is going to take care of the soldiers? If I quit right now, it's just going to be Ver, General Ver. So who's going to take care of the soldiers and steer them to the right path? So I think in that sense that, yes, my dad accepted being the head of the AFP. He just saw this opportunity to reform the system because now he's at the head.
Yep.
He's the leader now. Rather than, of course, you don't join on principle, but again, which is a better alternative?
Right.
To be there, you're part of a regime that's corrupt, and but at least you're there. You have the authority. You have the power to reform the system.
The opportunity to
Yes.
make it right.
Yes.
Okay. And then he retired, but eventually he accepted the post as Secretary of National Defense. And in the course of those years, he actually defended, well, on record, the administration of Cory for at least seven recorded official coups.
Coup d'etat.
Were you still in the country then?
I actually wasn't in the country at that time. I was away, but I had come home for a brief time for Christmas vacation.
Which coup was that?
Yeah, it's, the one where they shot the atrium.
Okay. Oh,
On Makati Avenue,
89.
Paseo de Rojas.
89.
Okay, I think that was the last one,
That was
right?
the last one.
Yeah, that was the last one, and I couldn't even imagine Makati having tanks there.
Right.
And when I came home for Christmas, I just saw the pock marks.
Right.
Shot by the cannons. It was incredible.
Oh yeah, by that time it was finished already.
Yeah, it was
ano?
because this was in December when I
Right,
came back, so
right.
it was incredible to me.
How did you take to news of these repeated attempts, no, of a government? Your father was now a very high-ranking official of. I mean, were you
I
just as
think-
worried as when you were those 3-4 days of EDSA
Yeah,
one?
of course. But again, now in a way, my dad is, his authority, his power, is more secure. It wasn't as precarious as when he was in the Marcos administration, because Cory was also supporting him. Not like in the Marcos years, They were also like judging my father and trying to judge his loyalties to the Marcos administration. So for that incident, or for that period of time, I felt that my dad just had to do what he had to do, and he still is very loyal to the Constitution and to what's good for the country. And of course, this was almost uncalled for and unheard of, to have not only one but several coups d'états.
7 officially.
7, okay? I thought it was 9. And each time my dad foiled them. And again, I think it wasn't a sense of duty, not so much for Cory, for loyalty to Cory Aquino, but rather to the Constitution and to the integrity of the Philippines as a nation. So he was more concerned with that. But it just so happened that Cory was the president at that time. And I think it also really hurt my dad to see that a fellow military man, namely Gringo Onasan, was leading this coup d'etat. So again, it's sort of like, two military forces fighting each other when you should be on the same side.
Right.
When you should be united in your duty to protect the people. But Gringo Onasan's side was putting the people in danger.
Right.
And in fact, of course, out of that, there was economic sabotage. So to foil those coup attempts, I think, being the Psy-war expert that my dad was, he just saw the pattern. It was all the same pattern. Okay, you have, I guess, these rumblings within the military. Of course, I'm sure he could sense that.
Yep.
And the modus that they follow. Okay, they try to take over the airports, the essential facilities. Okay, the bases, some fancy hotel. You could already see the pattern. So it was very predictable as far as my dad was concerned. So he was able to foil all these attempts. But again, still try to dialogue. And I think for him that was that has been the most important thing, to dialogue. And that's why he has never given up hope on the communist, the leftist rebellion. It's always a constant dialogue. Of course, it takes a long time.
Yep.
But again, he believes in the process. He believes that the dialogue, instead of going, all out war,
Shooting each other.
yes, shooting and just killing each other, the dialogue is still the best solution to the problems.
Just getting back to the coup years,
Okay.
did FVR give any instructions? I mean, what were you guys supposed to do? In the event of that.
That's kind of a hard question for me to answer, only because I wasn't here. I was in the States at that time.
Okay.
So-
Among the
I
family
think my sisters and my mom
who were here.
who were here were taken to a safe house, as far as I know. But for me, I was okay in the States, nothing alarming, nothing.
Yeah, but colleagues, classmates,
Yeah.
friends would
But
tell you,
I
"Hey,
would think,
your dad's in the news again."
yeah, but I think that's kind of like either, maybe Secret Service or something would deal with. I don't know if they keep tabs on me, but I was okay.
You were okay.
I was safe.
Anyone affected among the other 4 sisters? So how was Mrs. Ramos taking to these events?
I have to really
mean,
admire her because I think it's been a roller coaster ride for her, having been married to my dad all these years. She has taken it so well, and with such poise to have to deal with all these scary moments. all these dangerous moments with my dad. And she has always kept the family together and united, that we don't panic when those things happen, or we are alarmed, but it doesn't jar us too much.
Although par for the course, ano?
Yeah, I think it
Soldier's
is.
wife.
Yeah, exactly. Par for the course. And I think before they get married, the potential wife or the future wife has to accept that having a soldier as her husband will always be a difficult thing.
Okay. 89, that was the last coup on record. But Secretary Ramos opted to become candidate Ramos.
Yes.
Did anyone in the family
Apparently,
say-
again, I wasn't there, but
okay.
what I heard, there was a straw vote
among all of
among
you?
my mom and my sisters and my grandmother,
All right.
Dr. Josefa Hara Martinez, who was living with us at that time, but I was in the States at that time. And I think it was only my grandmother who voted
For.
for, and everyone was against.
Your sisters?
I think they were also against.
Okay.
So that's how the voting went in our household.
And yet he did not follow.
No, I think it was a mere exercise of, okay, I'm asking for your opinion, but if it doesn't go with what I want, I'm going to do what I want to do anyway.
Duly noted.
Yes,
Taking it
yes.
into consideration. Okay. Did entering politics, did the notion of getting into politics ever manifest itself? Did any of you see it? I mean, grandfather was
Yes.
Secretary Ramos was Narciso Ramos was congressman.
Yes.
No? Right.
And of course, my aunt was already,
And-
Auntie Letty was already a senator at
Manang
that
Leti,
time.
yes. Oh. So
Yeah.
was it something?
I think for us,
Did you guys see it as a natural?
yeah, it was a natural progression of things, meaning
Okay.
you have already become the AFP Chief of Staff. You've already become the Secretary of National Defense. So we had seen his professional career as a public servant going through from lieutenant up the ranks of the military, the highest ranks, including Secretary of National Defense. Where else do you go, right? So it was sort of just a national progression of his career. And at that time, he was still relatively young. And still a lot of energy to give, to serve the Filipino people.
Did you feel that he had a sense of mission?
Always. I think he always has this sense of mission. So whether as a soldier, as a father, as a brother, as a public servant, as a private person, as a retired citizen, he always has this mission to serve, to do good for the public, to do good for the country. I think it's always going to be there. It's just also his passion, I think, to be able to serve.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it was just something natural for him to get into. I mean, not necessarily being a politician, but being a public servant.
He joined the LDP, no?
Yes.
Initially. Worked to get its nomination as the party's
Yes.
standard bearer, but he lost it.
Yes.
But in the meantime, did anyone in the family get involved with him, working with him while he was?
We were
Yeah.
just involved in the background, so not really part of the decision-making process. I mean, meaning, forming the party. I mean, in the political sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We weren't involved because he had consulted, those more really actively working for government. And of course, all the other technocrats, in the academe and in private sector. But the family was always there to support him in whatever capacity.
He lost the primaries
Yes.
for LDP.
Yes.
And then that's when he
Mitra,
decided to,
Mitra won it.
and then that's when he decided to form, no?
Yeah, the Lakas Tao.
And
The
then
Lakas Tao
and
Party.
then allied with the
The Christian Democrats,
Yeah.
NUCD.
Yeah. Didn't anyone say enough? I mean, aren't you listening to the vote? I mean,
In the family. Did we really count?
yeah.
I think behind closed doors, or even in public, or I mean family sessions, my mother would always say like, tama na yan, enough. Like you give so much, and this is how they treat you. It's an unthankful job, of course. But I think my father's passion of public service will always be there. It's something difficult to kill, if you want to put it that way, or it's something very difficult to get rid of. It's just, I guess, genetically ingrained in him.
Yeah.
So it's almost futile if you're going to say, stop and don't do this, because he'll do it anyway. And I think we also have to understand that he's a good person. He has good things in his heart. He has good things that he wants to do for the country. Not for personal benefit or aggrandizement or, putting us in a very advantageous, ostentatious position. So it doesn't come from that. It comes from a good place where my father does want to serve the country and achieve great things for the country.
Yeah. You were you involved with the campaign? No.
I was involved in the campaign, but at that time I was pregnant.
Oh, okay.
With my two boys, actually. So I was pregnant in 1992, because my two boys, Patrick and Brian, were born 1991 and 1992.
Right. Oh.
So Patrick was my campaign baby, and Brian, my youngest, was the election baby.
Oh.
So I was helping, but behind the scenes. So it was mostly, receiving visitors or doing the paperwork and things like that. So mostly just in the office.
The traditional stuff. Pumping flesh.
Yeah, and it was really an eye-opener for me, because that was the first time that I had ever been involved really
In a political
campaign.
activity. Okay.
And it just really surprised me, really, aside from the good part of it, of course, and trying to get the votes and trying to explain to people what the platform is, what the campaign message is. There were also a lot of people who took advantage of it, meaning, they would just request, for example, kailangan ko ng pera, ganito, because my family's sick and all that. But little did we know, these people would actually go to the different candidates and give the same sales pitch. So it's not because they really want to help you, or it's not because they sincerely believe in you.
They were taking advantage
just taking advantage of it.
Of the situation.
Yeah, because of course, this is the time where a lot of money flows out. A lot of, spending is done. So of course, because there's such a, I don't even judge these people in the sense that there's such a high poverty rate, and maybe they just want to take advantage of this situation, really.
Oh, yeah. Did you have to go out on stage? Go up on stage?
Yeah, there was
you
a
had
funny
to do your
thing.
own
Yeah,
endorsement
because
speech for Dad.
I wish I had, or I wish I did.
Yeah.
Because again, I was so buntis at that time
Okay.
with my two sons that really, the only time that I got on stage was the meeting de avance, the last day of campaigning. I think this was at the Luneta.
Yes.
And that was the only time that I got to, like, hi, hello.
Yeah. Hi. Daughter number 4.
Exactly. Don't vote for me. Vote for him.
Okay, okay, okay. Nice. About 6, 7 weeks, pretty tense. Election, the official canvas and all, but eventually he gets proclaimed. And were you individually, each of you individually prepared and looking to the next 6 years?
Kind of not really. It was kind of a surreal scene, to tell you the truth, at least for me, in the sense that, of course, you read a lot about it. You see in the magazines or newspapers or whatever, what the other previous administrations have done. And you try to imagine yourself, okay, so is this what it's going to be like, Because no one really, it's like being a parent. No one really teaches you that.
Yeah.
And we had a brief lunch with Cory's chief of staff at that time. But it was more like, this is how it's going to be. This is the household and all that. You have to make sure that you're shielded from all these intrigues and, all that stuff. But no one really teaches you how to, properly behave or, how to deal with all the intrigues and all that. You just have to be there in it yourself to experience all this stuff. And of course, it's different. It's kind of case by case, meaning, the Ramos family will not be the same as the Aquino family, right? Like, for example, Balsi Aquino was the chief of staff of Cory. Yeah, while my dad, he didn't want any of the family involved.
Right.
None of us sisters were involved that closely with the Ramos administration. And I could understand in Cory's case, in Cory Aquino's case, because of course there has to be a sense of trust, a very high sense of trust and familiarity with the people you're working with.
Yes.
And of course to her, of course, it was the daughters whom she deemed that, would have been the closest and the people she would have trusted the most. But for my dad, again, I think being the professional that he is and really appreciating the family, but also saying you can't be involved with this because it's government, it's public service. And your family, it's private, you guys are private. So he just put that demarcation line there and defined it for us.
Was that something you appreciated?
Yes and no, because I think I would have wanted, in the sense that I really would have wanted to, see the workings of it. What goes on in the background, how things happen and all that.
Of the presidency.
Yes. Kind of maybe in a way like an Ivanka Trump kind of thing, okay? But not get in the way of, the vital decisions, the public decisions. But okay, maybe a go for, okay, I'll get you your water, your coffee or whatever. But still be in the background to actually see, the workings of this thing. Because I would have found it quite fascinating, actually. And, how things come into being, like how public policies come into being, how decisions are made. How do they discuss or how do they argue, how do they present their points in such matters, and not just say, okay, just do this because you're my close friend, or do this because I'm against the church.
No rules of conduct changed, the do's and don'ts that we discussed.
But it was more an enforcement, not a change, but more an enforcement, reinforcement.
Now especially.
Yeah. So just also like a reminder of, don't forget or make sure you do not get involved in corruption or transactions, which, things like that. Or if there are, of course, because, people want a piece of you, at that point.
Did anyone or?
A lot, but I would always say, why don't you go to the office
Right.
of the secretary?
Right.
Then just present your papers there. So basically, I was just a, a messenger. I was just a mailman, so to speak. I was
Or
just a
just
postman.
point them in the
Yeah, in the right
direction.
direction.
Right.
Exactly. But even that really surprised me because, the power brokers, I didn't know that, some people would actually demand for payment just to set up an appointment.
Wow.
Yeah, that surprised me because, like, oh, really? Like, I didn't know that was even being done. So,
What a-
if you wanted, just to see this person, or you wanted an appointment, meaning not position appointment, but
Right.
just to, a meeting
To meet,
appointment.
yeah.
Like, you had to pay, these people, these scrupulous people. And I think that was the good thing with our family because we had always looked at it, the position and the office and other positions of my dad as public service. So people would ask me like, would you, how did you feel about it and all that? And I said, it's public service. It's basically serving the public, and that's what you get elected for. But of course, other people are there because they want to get rich, they want to enrich themselves,
advantage.
or take advantage, for whatever reasons or what. But for us, it was always going to be looked at and will forever be looked at as public service.
So role assignments was just really, it's about public service.
Yes, but again, it was no, like my parents didn't define what our roles was were going to be. Like for example, you
Do
deal
that, you
with
do
the
that.
let's say you
No.
deal with artists or you deal with sports and all that. Again, it was kind of a natural outgrowth of what we were already. So me, I was in sports. I just naturally gravitated towards
yeah.
sports. And at that time, my dad appointed Dr. Perry Mackey, who was the dean of the College of Physical Education and Sports in UP.
Yep.
And I had a very good rapport with him. And in fact, I was one of the consultants for sport on a
Right.
1 peso a year salary. But again, it wasn't because I was the daughter of, but again, I had that background. And I felt that's where I wanted to go into. So, well, for my sister Jo, she wanted to do the arts and she wanted to do music. So,
That's
she,
where
she went towards that direction.
Right. Okay. Some instances where you did point someone towards some direction. I mean, even that, Christy, becomes an opportunity for name dropping. Christy Ramos asked me to drop by your office.
Yes.
Did that ever happen?
Lots of times. So, people would say, oh, so and so came here and said you were friends and all that. And I would say, I don't even know this person.
Okay.
And they would say, oh, okay, so the next time this person comes back, we'll be a little more careful. So those are the things. But again, not that I was reluctant to help people, because I felt that's the reason why I was there in the first place. Even though, of course, I did not have any real powers. But of course, the fact that you are the daughter of the president, people look up to you and they do respect your authority and your persona. And you can, of course, influence the situation somewhat. But, people would be there and just take advantage. And I would say, no, I don't know these people and I don't have anything to do with them.
Okay. So, yeah, you were taken advantage of as well, no?
Yeah, but again,
Because
of
of
course,
the-
you can't check everyone.
Right.
That's the difficult thing. You cannot check everyone. I guess when the situation develops into something bigger and larger, that it necessarily requires your attention, then that's the only time you really go into it. But if it's just these small little things and they're just name dropping left and right, but doesn't result to anything bigger, then it's something you let
Yeah.
go.
Yeah. Yeah. But those were pretty good years for you as well. I mean,
Yeah, I
you
think
got
so. Yeah.
SEA Games, Asian
Yeah.
Games,
Well,
the
for me,
Olympics
really, the
as
more
well.
significant thing, and in the end, I really feel sad about this whole thing, because in 1992, in the later part of 1992, I believe it was in October, that was the first time we had the first Philippine Sports Summit. And I was the summit director of that. So I worked with the office of Senator Joey Lina at that time, who was the head of the Committee on Youth and
In
Sports.
yes.
And it was really an assembly of stakeholders in the field of sports. So whether it was athletes, the national sports
Associations,
associations,
yeah.
the sports media people, the sporting goods manufacturing sector, the coaches,
Schools.
yes, schools, Dep Ed, well, that time it was DEX. We brought them all together in one session to really discuss, the situation in Philippine sports. What were the problems? How could we solve all the problems? And where do we go from here? It was a very positive, upbeat outcome,
Right.
a very successful session. But I just really regret, like, in the following years, because, of course, of the politics, because the Philippine Sports Commission took over. And it had been very highly politicized at
Yeah.
that point,
Yeah.
that we really were not able to fulfill, the required or the recommended solutions to the problems in Philippine sports. In fact, we still have those problems now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was one of the positive things that I really am proud about that we introduced at that time.
Politics. Did you or any of the sisters ever entertain getting into politics? Someone to carry on the legacy?
I think first it was my eldest sister, maybe, but you can
Yeah.
ask her that because she did graduate with a political science
Science degree,
degree
yes.
in college, in Bryn Mawr College, and she graduated cum laude. So I thought, she would be the one to go into politics. In the course of those years, when my dad was president, I was actually almost the most likely one because I think I was also the most visible one.
Yes.
I was actually also the honorary chairperson of the Kabisig People's Movement with the late
Yes.
Governor Bren Giao.
Yes. Yes.
Because I also had an agribusiness background. So I would be traveling with him almost every weekend, and we would go out to the provinces and then look at the the
Yeah.
livelihood programs and the agricultural programs. So I was also the most visible, I think. And
Anyway,
of course, aside from being in sports, so I would get invited to the DEX at that time, Department of Education and Culture and Sports events. Like the Palarong Pambansa and the regional
Yes,
meets
yeah,
and all
yeah.
that,
yeah.
and that would have a huge public attendance.
So none talaga.
No.
But how would you take to one of the apos considering giving politics a go?
I think my son Patrick would have also been actually interested. He graduated with a political science degree from Ateneo, but he eventually got his master's degree in Columbia University in urban planning.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he's my patriot. He's my nationalist.
Talaga.
He really feels a lot in terms of, what's going on in the country. He feels a lot about it. And we discuss a lot of times about political issues, and of course with Lolo, like how would Lolo feel about this, or why did Lolo do this? Why didn't he do this? So it does make up for a very interesting discussions.
Yes.
But right now he says like, I don't, I feel I'm not ready for it, but maybe in the future he could consider it.
Most likely,
Yeah.
He's the one
Ben,
who's
and again, it would come from a good place, meaning, the public service part of it. Again, not
yeah.
because he's the grandson of, not because he's my son, but because he has this genuine feel and this genuine concern for the country. And he would like to do his, contribution to helping out the country.
But that's part of his upbringing as well, right?
Yes, I think so. Not because we're putting our kids into those public positions just to carry down the family, family name and hold and authority, this nepotism, just to retain the power over generations. I don't think that would be his intention or our intention for that matter.
What was it like heading towards the end of the 6-year term? Were you all finally?
Yay! No. Relieved. No, because it does get to you. And I do, in a lot of sense, I do understand why the Marcoses and a lot of these political families really want to stay on forever. It is a very privileged position. It has many advantages. It really has a lot of power in it, but ergo there should also be a lot of obligation and responsibility to it. But apparently, all these privileges become the end all and the be all
Yeah.
for a lot of the political families in the Philippines to go on and on and on and on
You
without
guys-
any real change, without
Yeah.
improving people's lives, which
You
is very
guys-
unfortunate.
You guys weren't built that way.
No, we weren't, which was fortunate, really. We could see the advantage, of course. And I could understand, this is the reason why, all these families, all these political families just want to stay on and on and on. It's a good life in the sense that it's very privileged, it's comfortable. You can have a position. I'm sure, a lot of the
Yep.
political families, they'll take the position, but they'll just sit pretty and not do anything to fulfill their mandate, which is really, I think, the unfortunate situation in this country. So you will have, okay, mother is governor, the son is now counselor, brother is, congressman, and down the line. And I think, really, given a choice, especially for the sons and the daughters, the children of these politicians, I think given a real choice, they wouldn't want to be politicians. I'm sure they would like to be artists or, businessmen or, athletes and other things. But they're kind of forced into this, niche
mode
that
of-
you have to run because sino pa ang tutuloy sa pwesto.
It's a family business.
It's a family business. So I find that very unfortunate for this country. Unless you have maybe a family like the Kennedys in some sense, they've had a real service to the public, to the country. So that is what I would like to see in this country. And in fact, my dad is against nepotism, and that's why maybe, none of us are really going into politics. Not that we do not appreciate it or not because we cannot do it. I think we could be effective politicians. We could be good public servants, especially in comparison with what's out there already. But it's also the basis for democracy.
Yeah. Yep. So you guys were looking forward to the peace and quiet of private life.
Yeah,
Was that something?
going back to the old grind, so to speak, because again, you're there for 6 years and you're really under the microscope. And I think especially for me personally, it was really a tremendously difficult time for me because I had created a lot of enemies in sport.
It,
You know,
yeah, it was a,
unwittingly, I think. It wasn't my intention to, to have so many enemies, so to speak. And, to have to try to go back to the normal life after those 6 years, the tumultuous years, was also a welcome development for me. But I think we, and I had emphasized this also to, my kids, because of course, they feel they're different because they have bodyguards, they go to school, they have their PSG, while other
yeah,
kids
at
don't,
that
right?
time, yeah.
So, I would tell them, you're not going to have this forever. And it's fine, you enjoy it, but you don't abuse it. You don't tell your PSG, go beat up my,
Yeah,
my
yeah.
classmate because he's a jerk.
It's
So
not an
not
entitlement. No.
exactly, it's not an entitlement. In fact, we have to be thankful for that privilege. And the other thing I think, what would keep me, you know, grounded was the fact that I would just tell myself, after all the public activities, when you're, in the public light, I go home and I say, this title of being first daughter is just like clothes. When you get home, you just take it off and you're the same person. So that's how I treated it, and that's how I became grounded with this whole thing, because you can get lost in it.
Christy, but the problem was FVR didn't quite go quietly
Into the
you know,
night.
into the night because, I mean, Joseph Estrada took over.
Yes.
It was noticeable after a few months, and he played quite an active role in 2001. I mean, Dad, why are you getting into politics
Into that again,
again?
right? I think that was something, again, that we had long accepted, that this being a public servant
Di talaga,
and the
no?
patriotism and the nationalism, were things we will never get rid of from him. He would, while he always would say, "Okay, I'm now private citizen Eddie," we knew that wasn't quite, the behavior. He wasn't going to sit quietly in the corner and just enjoy private life. I mean,
Yeah.
that just wasn't him. So when that came about, we knew, like, okay, go ahead, because we believe in you, and Pa, you're absolutely right, and we understand because you're concerned about the country. So whenever he goes in his, in his public servant mode, that's already something like, we don't stop you from doing that.
Yeah,
We just
yeah.
understand and accept it.
And it hasn't stopped, no?
It hasn't stopped,
To-
and I don't
to-
think it ever will.
Does he share these, I mean, commentaries with you? I mean,
Not too much, unfortunately. So it's, people would tell me, then you must have like really interesting conversations with your dad. Because my dad, of course, has led a very interesting life.
right.
And it's something also that, I would like to know, right? And of course, with the Apo, they would like to know
Right.
what was the legacy of your dad and what he did and all these these things. But I think it's also when we're together, private time, he just wants to relax. He doesn't want to discuss all these political things, So yeah, sometimes we ask him, what do you think about this situation? So it's, yeah, like yes or no, and that's the end of
Yeah.
that.
Christy, how does FBR take to tragedy and hurt? And I'm talking about, Joe's passing and Chula's life-altering accident. Yeah.
It's I'm sure deep down inside those are difficult situations for him, because of course it concerns family, more so his daughters. But I think he always tries to be, brave about it and composed about it. but I'm sure it does hurt him and affect him. I think he doesn't like to show that weakness or that side of him, that, that vulnerability. I think he doesn't like to show that. And maybe it's not because he lacks the compassion, but I think it's also maybe part of his training as a soldier. He's gone through 2 wars. He was in the Korean War, and he was in the Vietnam War. And of course, aside from the other fightings in Mindanao
All these,
and
yeah.
and other areas, and I'm sure he's seen the bloodshed and the grief of the families, and the tragedy that happens. So I think in some sense that also has toughened him up.
And it's very private to him, I guess.
It is a very private thing to him, because even with us, even during the time of Joe's demise, and of course, we had to face the public because there were so many sympathizers,
Yes, yes.
visiting the wake and just extending their condolences and all that. It's difficult for him, I think, to show the real emotions, to have to break down in public. I
Yeah.
mean, I think that's kind of unheard of. And more so like when he was president, okay, when you have tragedies and you're supposed to be the public figure there, you're the father of the nation. You have
Composed
to be
and all.
composed, and you have to be cool in spite of, tragedies happening.
Christy, any no grandchildren yet, but from what I
No.
pick up from Patrick, he intends to have a, and it's something that
A
I
nice
asked him.
family.
It's something that I asked the Apos last week, and if you had your own grandchildren, what would you tell them of FVR? What legacy of FVR would you tell them?
Again, this, while people think he's not Lolo, is not, or Lolo, great grandfather, would seem to be this cold, aloof person, because he had to be. He's really a very humane person and caring person. He cares about other people. And he's a good man. He has good values. And I think this is what the great-grandchildren, the grandchildren, would have. That is the greatest legacy my dad could impart to the following generations. That he cared, not so much enriching the family, because, that's not us, but really enriching the lives of people in such a way, in his own personal way, that he's strict, he's disciplined, he's professional. But that doesn't stop him from also enjoying and laughing and having fun in life. So I think that's the best thing that, that Patrick, my son, can convey to my future grandkids. This sense of service to other people, but not to deter, people from being humane on the other side.
Okay. Thank you very much, Christy.
You're welcome.